What's up, makers? It's Emily. I'm DIY My Way over on Instagram if you've seen me there. If you haven't, hi! It's so nice to meet you. My name's Emily, and every week I sit down and do my little virtual knitting circle. It's been knitting so far. I also crochet. And I tell you a true crime story. It's so much fun. I actually really enjoy researching these every week because I love true crime, and this gives me a reason to really go deep on a story. But we call this Maker's Circle Stab and Stitch. And let me tell you, this week's is wild. You've seen the title: murder, MLM, Mormonism, and a splash of sex life. This is insane. That being said, viewer discretion is advised. I will describe a graphic crime scene and also explicitly describe some sex scenes that are important to the story. That being said, if you are someone who struggles with gore, who's not comfortable with that, or someone who is really triggered by domestic violence, this may not be the video for you. It's okay if you need to close out, totally fine. I'll give you a warning before I go into it. All right, so before I get started, what I'm wearing this week, in addition to my brand new microphone, which I hope you guys like the sound of, is my Stay Pole sweater. It's by Park, from Park and Knit. And it's actually a pattern that is releasing today. I promise I didn't plan this to have 2 test knits launching. I don't do that many test knits. It's gonna happen 2 weeks, then it's gonna stop. But I love this sweater. It is made completely out of scrap yarn that I had already. I call it all the fall things because it's just all the colors I wanted the leaves to turn while I was making it. I love it a lot. I will link the Ravelry link in the description box. And the yarn for this was pretty much what I pulled out of my stash, which ended up being Caron Simply Soft and Paintbox Yarns Cotton DK. I have Malabrigo yarn. It's Ario. It's in the shade Azul. I'm obsessed. And I am making a beanie. Actually, shout out to Molly May from Ponder and Ply for sending me this pattern. It's from Pearl Soho. It's a free pattern, actually. It's the boyfriend hat, or the boyfriend beanie. And it's supposed to be 2 strands of fingering pulled together. I've chosen to just use this because it's a sport weight. But it's super stretchy, super plushy. It's going to be an amazing hat for one of the men in my life. You know, my dad, my brothers. So this week's story has a little bit of everything. But we're going to start from the beginning because I asked on an Instagram poll and this is what you told me you like. So Jodi Arias. She was born on July 9th, 1980 in Salinas, California. Honestly, Jodi had a pretty normal childhood. She tried to say otherwise in her trial, but when you look back, you talk to her family, it was normal. It wasn't until she was a preteen or a teenager that people started noticing things about her. And really, if you ask people, they would say Jodi had a lot of boyfriends. She's pretty. She was charismatic, and if you look on message boards, this is not confirmed, but many of her exes would say that Jodi was clingy. She would exhibit that kind of behavior that, quote, scared guys away. She was aggressively clingy, she needed to have your location. She needed you to check in every hour. She needed those types of things. It was that type of behavior, very controlling behavior that they would say that she exhibited. So Jodi, she grew up relatively normal. Once she was 17 or 18, she did start to date older guys. She got into some fights with her parents, and she ended up moving out when she was 17 years old and went to live with a boyfriend at the time. Jodi kind of reinvented herself several times throughout her life, and one of her reinventions is how she met our other character, Travis Alexander. Travis was 3 years older than Jodi, roughly. He was born on July 28th, 1977 in Riverside, California. He was taken in by his grandmother as a child and raised by her, and Travis's grandmother was devoutly religious. She was a Mormon, or a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints. We're going to talk a lot about Mormonism in this. I just want to be really clear. None of this is related to Mormonism. They are 2 people who are Mormon who were involved in this. I'm not saying anything bad about the Mormon Church. It's great. I know a lot of people who are Mormon. It's just don't take it out of context. Okay, this is the story. These are 2 individuals. Thanks. Anyway, so Travis, as an adult, he becomes a salesperson pretty early on in the MLM, or multi-level marketing company, prepaid legal services. Prepaid legal services sold legal plans that would guarantee you between 30 and 600 hours of attorney time. But it was relatively successful. It actually turned out to be a scam in 2008 and was acquired by the company Legal Shield. The only reason I include that is because I find MLMs hilarious. So Travis and Jodi meet each other in September of 2006. And it's actually through prepaid legal services, which is that MLM that they're both now involved with. I'm going to call it PLS when I talk about it. It's just easier to say. But so they meet at this conference in Las Vegas. Jodi is there because she just got involved with it. She's like gung-ho, ready to hit the ground running. Travis is pretty high up in the MLM already. He's super successful. And he actually is friends with the person who recruited Jodi from her local area. And this person is like, hey, Travis, you don't have a date to this VIP event on the night before the conference. You should bring this girl that just started working with us. She's just getting into the company. Well, that person was Jodi. So they go on a blind date to this VIP event together that Travis had the tickets to, right? And that's how they meet. They hit it off. But Travis is Mormon, and he's very committed to his faith. So they're talking afterwards, and Travis tells Jodi, look, I can't date you unless you're Mormon. That's really important to me that the person that I'm with is Mormon and this is my faith. And so I told you they met in September of 2006. On November 26th of 2006, Jodi's baptized into the Mormon faith. Get this, Travis was her sponsor. Now, at this point, they were not officially dating, but they were already sexually involved, which did come out later in the trial. They weren't officially together until February 2nd of 2007. So honestly, they spent about as much time together as a couple as they did talking before they got together, because they ended up breaking up on June 29th of 2007. Now, at this point, they had spent the entire relationship long distance. Jodi was still living in California, and Travis was living in Mesa, Arizona, which is in Maricopa County. You've probably heard a lot about Maricopa lately. So after they broke up at the end of June in 2007, Jodi moves to Mesa, Arizona. She ended up living there from July 2007 until April of 2008, which to me seems a little bit weird that you would be long distance with a guy the whole time you're dating him and then move to where he lives after you break up. But hey, no judgment. So they were not together after they broke up, but they were still in contact. And records did show later on that they were still involved sexually even after they broke up. And she moved there because, she was there, right? The defense would later say that Travis was using Jodi for his needs and keeping it quiet from his public life while he looked for someone that he could be with long term that was more acceptable with his faith. Okay, so fast forward about a year. It's June 5th, 2008. And Travis's friend Mimi, who he had briefly dated, they decided they were better as friends. They were already friends. But she is getting ready to go with him on this company trip that he has been selected to go on to Cancun, Mexico. She's so excited, except it's almost time to leave, and she still hasn't heard from Travis. She's called him, she's texted, nothing. So she heads over to his house and tries to get a hold of his roommate. And she knocks on the door, she goes in, finally she knocks on his roommate Zach's room, and Zach's like, oh, I thought Travis was already in Cancun. Didn't he leave? I haven't seen him in a few days. So Mimi's like, no, he's leaving with me today. So Zach's like, okay, and he goes and he finds an extra set of keys to Travis's bedroom. He opens the door, and Zach would describe it as his heart just dropped when he opened the door. Now he would say this because when he opened the door, the first thing he saw were pools of blood going down the hallway towards the closet and the bathroom, which were connected in the master bedroom. He went in and walked into the bathroom and immediately came back out and said, quote, call 911, he's dead, end quote. Some reports say that even as early as in the 911 call, Jodi Arias was mentioned. His friends told police at some point during that day that Jodi was an ex-girlfriend that they should look into. They claimed that Travis had told them that Jodi was stalking him, that she had hacked into his Facebook and slashed his tires. Now, none of these claims were ever substantiated. They were just alleged claims that they had made, but it was brought up later on. So police show up to investigate, and when they go into the room, they see a lot of blood. There's a bloody handprint on the wall. Travis is in the shower. He's dead. It almost looks like he's been rinsed off a little bit, but not like wholeheartedly, just like a little water run, and there's still a lot of blood there. There's blood all over the carpet. It was described as if he was, it was slow, and that he had dragged himself trying to escape his attacker. Most of his injuries were to his back or the back side of him, his head, etc. He had been stabbed more than 20 times. Different reports will say different things. I've seen 27, I've seen 29. The official autopsy did say more than 20. He also had his throat slashed from like all the way across, so much that even his windpipe was slashed. It was described as being almost decapitated. That was how deep this cut was to his throat. Sorry, graphic. He had also been shot in the back of the head, which the person who did the autopsy later testified may have happened after his death. In addition to that, he had defensive wounds on his hands and forearms, which shows signs of a struggle. So whoever had done this to him, he was in a fight with them. The police, in investigating the area, they found a .25 caliber case, or a casing from a .25 caliber gun. They also found the bloody handprint on the wall and a digital camera that was in the washing machine. Now, this actually was not found by police. It was found by Juan Martinez, who was the lawyer for the prosecution. In Arizona, they can call the lawyer while they're doing the investigation, and the lawyer can look for other pieces of evidence that the police may not find compelling. Juan Martinez found this digital camera. He sent it off to be processed, and although it was waterlogged and the photos had been previously deleted, the forensic team was able to recover the photos that were taken. It's important to note that this camera, sorry, teeny tiny stitches, right? But this camera, it did look like it was new, and it had photos on it only from that day. The photos that were on this camera showed Travis and Jodi. They were the only two people shown in the photos. And most of the photos were the two of them in sexually suggestive poses. That's what the news said. Basically, they were posing for each other. It was in the bathroom. It looked a lot like they were goofing off, like it was a sexual moment, and they were having fun in this, or taking these photos, except for the last two photos. The second to last photo is considered to be the last photo of Travis alive. It was taken at 5:30 p.m. that day, and it was taken in the shower. He's on the ground looking up at the camera, and some people that have looked at it have described it as he had a look of terror on his face in this photo. He is very wide-eyed. I don't know if I would call it terror, but that's what I've read. The next photo, which is believed to have been taken on accident, it looks like the camera was dropped and it hit the shutter and took a photo. It shows an individual who is most likely Travis on the ground, quote, bleeding profusely. He did not look to be alive in this photo. It also shows Jodi's foot and ankle. She was wearing a pretty distinctive pair of pants that day that they identified and matched from the photo to what she was wearing in other photos where she was wearing pants. I have seen some people who have looked at this and believe that this photo was taken while Jodi was preparing to cut Travis's throat. The position that she was in, it looked like, oh, this is Claudia. The position she was in looked like she was kind of bent over him, getting ready to slash. However, that didn't come up in court. That's just opinions of people that I've seen. So I think Claudia is going to join us for a little while. So this is where things get interesting. Jodi, she was questioned, of course, because Travis's friends mentioned her. She was Travis's ex-girlfriend, all of those things. But in the course of questioning and the trial, Jodi changed her story. Not once, but twice. and very dramatically changed it. It's not like, oh, she changed one detail. Like, she completely changed her retelling of events and told 3 unique stories. So first of all, let's start with the facts. May 28th, 2008, before all of this happened, Jodi's grandparents' house is robbed. There's really not a whole lot taken, not a lot of money, just some random things, and a .25 caliber gun, which just so happens to match the gun that was used to kill Travis. The prosecution would later speculate that Jodi had staged this robbery to get the gun, and they called this one of the 2 acts of premeditation that they called out in the trial. Jodi was actually going on a trip to Utah that she was planning. So she was visiting Ryan Burns, who was another PLS employee that she knew. She, to go, was renting a car that she was going to drive there instead of putting the mileage on her own car, and had borrowed 2 gas cans from an ex-boyfriend to do this. She also bought a 3rd gas can from Walmart before she went, and she filled up her car, the 2 gas cans, and then the 3rd gas can in 3 separate purchases from the Shell station before she went. So I sneezed and Claudia left, because around my house, that's a cardinal sin, sneezing. Anyway, so there's a couple things suspicious about this. First is the gas cans. By getting these gas cans, she basically avoided a stop at the gas station, which prosecutors would speculate allowed her to get in and out of Arizona without stopping at a gas station that was off of her speculated route to go from where she was in California to Utah. She did not stop at a gas station in Arizona. She put 2,800 miles on this car, which was a lot more than what it would take to get from her location to Utah and back. But it was approximately what it would take to do her location to Mesa, Arizona to Utah and back, as prosecutors pointed out in court. She also, when she returned the car on June 7th, it had the 2,800 miles on it. It also was noted that the floor mats in the car were missing. And there were red stains that looked like Kool-Aid. She gave some excuse about them. There were these red stains on the front and rear seats. Now, Jodi, when she rented this car, had paid for the incident insurance, which meant that the car rental place was responsible for the mess. They cleaned it up, and police were not able to examine this. So no one really knows what those stains were. Story number 1. I'm going to break these up for you as we go through because this gets a little bit confusing, at least for me. I don't know if you've researched this before. Anyway. Story number 1. Jodi is questioned by the police. After Travis's body is discovered, she's back in California. They bring her in for questioning, and she claims that the last time she saw Travis was in April of 2008. Now, at this point, police know that's a lie. They've seen the photos of her in June at Travis's house, the day he was killed, but they don't say that necessarily. So she's initially questioned and says that she has not seen him since April. She also had made several calls to him after his death and left voicemails, which would support the story that she didn't know and she hadn't heard from him. However, when they did DNA testing and examining the crime scene, they found that the bloody handprint on the wall was a mix of Travis and Jodi's DNA. So her blood and her DNA was on that handprint. Once they brought that up to her, Jodi pivoted. She changed her story and told police that what had actually happened. She was there, and there were these 2 intruders that came in, and it was a home invasion gone wrong that had killed Travis, and that Jodi herself had barely escaped with her life and was too scared to call police, that they had threatened her, and that she was just going to pretend that she wasn't there in the hopes that they would find these people that had killed Travis. She describes this scene in the police interview in a lot of detail, frankly. She says, they're 2 white Americans from what she could tell. They're wearing ski caps that cover most of their face except their mouth, nose, eyes, etc. She says it's 1 man and 1 woman, and she once again states that she didn't call the police because she was afraid. Jodi actually stuck with this story for about a year and a half. And this is where the other thing came in for this story, and that made it so sensationalized, was that Jodi started doing media interviews and telling this story to the media. She did several interviews. She was really, a lot of people read into how concerned she was with her appearance. She was putting powder on before the interviews. There were these videos captured of her making small talk with the reporters beforehand that people read as narcissistic. Personally, like, I look at that and I'm like, maybe it's just because I'm another young woman who's close to her age, and I'm like, yeah, like, if you're going on national TV, you would care about how you look. So Jodi's doing these interviews, and one of the interviews she does is with CBS's 48 Hours. This is historic because it is the first time in the history of this show that an interview from 48 Hours has been used in a trial for death penalty. Spoiler alert, they went for the death penalty. So she does this interview, and in the interview she says, and I quote, "No jury is going to convict me because I'm innocent. You can mark my words on that." This scene and this quote was played in the trial, and the prosecution used it against her because between the time that she did this interview and the time that she had the trial, Jodi changes her story again. The final version of her story was that she killed Travis, but she claimed that it was a justifiable homicide. I'm sorry, I can't talk apparently. It was a justifiable homicide. This is the version of the story that she tells in court. So, trigger warning, if you are someone who has experienced domestic violence and is easily triggered by these stories, this may be time for you to hop off. Totally fine, I understand. As someone who has experienced this myself, watching this part of the trial was a little bit challenging for me. I did actually watch a large portion of the trial. And I formed my own opinions about it, and I'm just gonna say, to be fair, their relationship was not nice. It wasn't healthy. It felt very toxic. The defense produced a lot of text messages, emails, voice recordings where Travis said some things that, in my opinion, are not okay, and that do not denote a healthy relationship to me. They played a lot of sex tapes in court, and something that, to me, it felt very degrading and very domineering. And that's something that if you don't have two consenting adults is not healthy. I've seen different analyses of this. I've seen different analyses of this. I've read a lot about it, and a lot of people that have looked at it have said, you know, this to me sounds like two consenting adults. In my opinion, I don't know. I wasn't there. I can't form an opinion about whether or not she was consenting or just going along with it as she claimed in court. However, they did play these sex tapes in front of both of their families, including his family, who was Mormon and very devoutly religious, which was just, I'm sure, traumatizing for them. That's how it was sensationalized in the media as well, was because this trial was about sex. And they really did put her sex life on trial. Now, part of that was Jodi's choice, or her defense's choice at least, because the way that they went at this case was to say that Travis, he was abusing her. She was a victim of domestic violence, and that he was sexually deviant, not just by religious standards or by sexual assault standards, but that he was also a pedophile. Now, this claim didn't really make it very far. The defense made it. They weren't able to substantiate it, but they really went on the attack to try to prove Jodi's innocence in this case. Jodi actually does something that's very abnormal for a murder trial defendant. She takes the stand, and she takes the stand for 18 days to tell the story herself. While she's on the stand, she admits to killing Travis, but she claims that she doesn't remember fighting back. She claims that she's taking photos of him and that she drops the camera on accident and he just flips out. She says, quote, "He stepped out of the shower and he lifted me up and he body slammed me again on the tile." She says, "I remembered where he kept a gun, so I grabbed it. He was chasing me. I turned around. We were in the middle of the bathroom. I pointed it at him with both of my hands. I thought that he would stop, but he just kept running. I didn't even think I was holding the trigger. I was just pointing it at him, but I didn't even know that I shot him. It just went off, and after I broke away from him, he said, 'Fucking kill you, bitch.'" However, interestingly, when she's cross-examined about her experience in killing him, she says that she doesn't remember stabbing him. She says she remembers, quote, almost nothing. After that, she says, I have no memory of stabbing him, and she just remembers screaming. Now, if you'll remember, Travis was stabbed anywhere from 20 to 29 times. He also had his throat slit all the way across. So it's like they brought in psychologists that said, like, hey, this is something that can happen when you go through something traumatic where your brain just kind of blocks these things out. However, the prosecution brought in psychologists that said they had studied Jodi for weeks and that her memory was selective when it was convenient for her. So I'll let you make your choices there. While she's on the stand, Jodi does discuss her sex life with Travis. She describes both anal and oral sex. She says that in Travis's opinion, it wasn't against the Mormon rules because it wasn't vaginal sex, which is what's not allowed before marriage in their opinion. She and the defense play a tape that she had recorded of a phone conversation with Travis where he said, quote, he wanted to dress her up like Little Red Riding Hood and tie her to a tree. In this same statement, she says that she had found him masturbating to child pornography, and that he had confided in her at this point that he found children, especially young boys, attractive. Now, a few things here. First of all, they were not able to substantiate this claim. This was viewed by a lot of media and the prosecution as the defense's attempt to demonize and put the victim on trial, kind of like victim blaming. It's also in the court tapes, in the videos that I saw, she appears very reluctant to discuss this part of her life. She's clinging to that devout Mormonism that she was baptized into for her relationship with Travis. She hides behind her hair. She's looking like this the whole time that she's discussing it. She averts her eyes, and she keeps up this very shy demeanor. She then goes on to describe the abuse that she experienced, and one specific story that she tells describes, she said something that pissed Travis off. He yelled at her, and then he kicked her, and she had held her hand up like this to defend herself, and he kicked and hit her finger. She then holds her hand up to the court, and I can't even show it, shows a bent finger. And shows that her left finger is permanently bent, that it was injured. The defense also plays a lot of tapes and just different things that they have that describe the way that he spoke to her and the things that he called her. I'm not going to say those words because personally a lot of those words I don't say, but he was not nice to her. Let's just leave it at that. It's been 10 days of defense, and they're interviewing her, they're getting her story out there. And now it's time for the prosecution's cross-examination, and Juan Martinez steps up. Juan Martinez is known for being a tough prosecutor. He was at the scene of the crime. He's seen this. He has a lot of opinions, and he is coming in hot. He starts cross-examining Jodi, and Jodi, it's been said that she held her own against him. I personally watched the tapes, and I would agree. She is a very tough person to cross-examine. She wouldn't follow his line of questioning. And it wasn't until he had backed her into a corner that she would admit to something. So this cross-examination went on for 8 days. He did play the tape from 48 hours as evidence against her. He pulled up all of this evidence and all of the lies she had told. And honestly, guys, this trial devolved into some very just outlandish lies that Jodi told. It felt almost like she was playing to the media more than she was trying to prove her own innocence. Travis's friends looked at this and they would say that she was enjoying her time in the spotlight and was milking the trial for more of it. Personally, I tend to agree. And that's because of what happened next. So they finally finish the trial. The jury goes out, they deliberate for 3 days. And the reason they deliberate is there are a few holdout jurors that look at her and truly believe that a little girl that is her size, Jodi is small, that say that there is no way that she could have killed this man. And they discuss it, and they establish the premeditation that the prosecution, has established. She acquired the gun, she acquired the gas cans, all of these different things. And they say, you know what? Yes, And they come back, and after 3 days, they deliver a guilty verdict to the charge of first-degree murder. Now, not even 5 minutes after this, Jodi gives an interview. She says, quote, "If I had my choice, I would take the death penalty because I don't want to spend the rest of my life in prison." She also went on to say, "I believe death is the ultimate freedom, so I'd rather just have my freedom." It's jarring because she's just so calm. She doesn't, in that interview, sound like a woman who's just been convicted of first-degree murder that she got up on the stand and said was self-defense. It's almost like she expected it. So from there, they move on to sentencing. And in Arizona, the way that it works is the sentencing is an additional trial, families speak, etc., and then that same jury goes and decides on her sentence. So the jury, they go back and they go to decide on the sentence, and they came back as a hung jury. So out of that group, 8 of them were in favor of the death penalty, which the state had recommended, and 4 were in favor of life in prison, or not in favor of death. Now, something I'll say is, like, it is rare for a woman to be convicted of the death penalty, just in general. Like, statistically, women are less likely to be convicted to be sentenced to death. Not convicted, excuse me. So because of this, the judge had no choice but to declare a mistrial. They declare this mistrial, and everybody's like, so we have to do this again. Great. They come back with a new jury, same judge, same defense, prosecutor, etc. So they end up actually having to do this 2 more times because the state and the prosecution felt strongly that they should pursue the death penalty. And this was, in a lot of cases, or a lot of the time, due to the urging from Travis's family and friends. So they went for the death penalty again and came back with a hung jury 11-1. There was one holdout that just absolutely did not believe in the death penalty, did not believe we should sentence this woman to death. So after that second time, the law in Arizona is that you can't push for a sentencing of the death penalty more than 2 times. After 2 times, it's off the table. You're not allowed to do it. So they went back a 3rd time, life in prison. So it was a completely agreed jury. Jodi Arias was convicted to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So I did some follow-up research because this ended in 2018, and it's been a couple years since then. And one of the things that I watched was an interview with Jodi Arias' first cellmate. So she was cellmates with this woman in between her conviction trial and her final sentencing trial. They lived together for about 5 months, and this woman said a couple of things about Jodi. First of all, Jodi was a flirt, which should honestly surprise no one, based on her behavior in the trial and in her mugshots, even if you've seen them. She flirted with the guards so she could get away with keeping her supplies for stick and poke tattoos, which she made money, or extra money, selling to other inmates. Her former cellmate actually in the interview had 6 different tattoos that Jodi had given her, including one where Jodi tattooed her own name onto her previous inmate, which to me seems a little narcissistic. This woman also said that Jodi is just hands down a sociopath. She described Jodi's behavior as very hot and cold. She would use you when she needed you and just absolutely love on you, and you'd feel amazing. The woman read letters she'd received from Jodi when she was in prison that just completely stopped, and Jodi just flicked the switch on their friendship when she was convicted to life in prison. She also said that Jodi would manipulate men from jail and was also manipulating her own family because her family, despite everything, was still on her side. They would come visit her, and Jodi would decline their visits to meet with men that she was manipulating, and that she's manipulating these men to send her money, sending them letters, all of these different things. So she is in jail for life. She is not supposed to have the possibility of parole in her lifetime, but Jodi is still being Jodi, apparently. Gotta love it. Okay, so tell me what you think. Do you think that Jodi really stalked Travis like he claimed? Do you think that all of this is true? Was she really, Is she crazy? Tell me in the comments, what do you think about her? What do you think about the whole trial and how this all went down? Her changing stories 3 times? That's wild, right? Also, for my makers out there, I want to know what you're working on this week. Drop your pattern links in your photos. I'm super curious. Anyway, if you stuck around this long and you haven't subscribed already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I don't know which side it's going to be on. Also, give me a thumbs up if you liked this, because it just lets me know that you stuck around and you liked the story that I told. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me for this whole story. I will see you all next week. Have a great rest of your day. Have fun with your projects. I will talk to you later.